And political director David Chalian, CNN political commentators Maria Cardona and Alice Stewart. Maria is a Democratic strategist and Alice is a Republican strategist. David, to you first. A lot happening this morning. Where do things, I mean, the general election campaign is on, and we're seeing Trump and Biden trying to get those Nikki Haley supporters. It's going to be a tough sell, probably from both sides of this.
Yeah, and with our polling director, Jenna Jessa, have been looking at some numbers this morning to try to understand this conversation about Nikki Haley voters. Who are they, and what did her composition of voters look like? So across the 6 states that we have exit polls for in this contest, 48% of Haley voters were Republicans. 41% of Haley voters were independents, and 11% of Haley voters were Democrats. So what we're calling Haley voters are actually going to be independents, never Trump or Republicans, and some Democrats. So what we're looking at is pieces of the Biden 2020 coalition. I mean, in our January poll, we found 19% of Haley supporters said they voted for Joe Biden in 2020. So there is overlap there. That's why you see the Biden statement as what it is, because they understand this may not be a very hard sell. These are people with some affinity for Joe Biden. Perhaps they voted for him in 2020 as an anti-Trump measure, and so trying to keep them in the fold. Obviously, the Trump campaign, as Nikki Haley alluded to in her remarks, will need to court some of this support as well. Remember, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden in 2020 because he lost independent voters by 13 percentage points to him. Well, where are independent voters in the context of this Republican primary? They're with Nikki Haley. Donald Trump's going to need some of those independents back into his fold if he is going to succeed in getting back to the Oval Office.
Yeah, and 2 very different reactions from Biden and Trump. Biden trying to, extend the olive branch, make that outreach to those Nikki Haley supporters. Donald Trump saying he trounced Nikki Haley, sort of tap dancing on her political grave. And let's talk about the Mitch McConnell factor here as well, Alice. It wasn't that long ago when McConnell was going after Trump for his actions on January 6th. Let's look at this right now.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
I mean, Alice, this is quite a pivot.
Yeah, there's going to be quite a laundry list of people with similar statements that McConnell had that are now on board with Donald Trump. And look, you've looked further in Donald Trump's statement this morning. He is appealing to Haley voters. He is saying, I'm welcoming you to our campaign. Our enemy now is Joe Biden, and his policies have hurt this country, and it's time to join, as he says, the greatest movement in political history and take out Joe Biden. And it's really important to note that he is going to work on addition rather than division, and that's the only way to move forward. And look, you can't understate the significance of what the fact that he will be the presumptive nominee means moving forward. As Kristen said, his team now, the campaign team, is now merged with the RNC, and he's able to use their joint fundraising agreement, their election integrity department, their communications department that has really helped shape Joe Biden as one of the most unpopular presidents in history. And the fact that they are able to join forces and move forward and take on Joe Biden, that is going to be significant to him moving forward. And look, you can underestimate Donald Trump. If you do so, you don't understand Republican voters. They're not concerned with the January 6th, his legal woes, and the chaos and confusion. They're looking at policies like immigration, the economy, and national security that Donald Trump espouses, and they say will take our country in the right direction.
Yeah, it sounds like Trump is trying to keep that base revved up. Biden making a play for those Haley voters. There's folks in the middle. Yeah. David Chalian is right. Perhaps it's not the right thing to call them Nikki Haley supporters now that we're moving into the general election campaign. Up until today. Now they're sort of up for grabs, independent, never Trump, folks that might vote for the Democrat, might vote for Joe Biden. Biden said this in his statement. Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley supporters. I want to be clear, there is a place for them in my campaign.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And clearly I think that the Donald Trump campaign understood that those words that Donald Trump was saying in terms of saying, Nikki Haley supporters are not going to be welcome into the MAGA movement. We're going to purify the MAGA movement. No Romneys, right? And that kind of language, the campaign, Donald Trump's campaign, understands that that is not how you do addition. And I guarantee you, the person who wrote the statement this morning for Donald Trump, which is opposite of what he has been saying, was not him. And so I think moving forward, I think it's going to be hard for him to maintain that stance, because for him, it is all about just the MAGA movement. And interestingly, in Nikki Haley's statement, she kind of went after the MAGA movement. She talked about how dysfunctional Congress was. Well, Congress is dysfunctional because of the MAGA movement. They haven't been able to do anything. She went after people who were not supporting money for Ukraine, money for Israel. Who is that? That's the MAGA movement. And so I think it's interesting. She also is trying to continue to have her lane. And the way that she did this was also out of a position of strength, of dignity, and not from a position of weakness, which is normally how somebody leaving a campaign does it.
Let me get Alice into this conversation. Judging from CNN's exit poll results that we were showing all of our viewers last night, and David did a great job on that, is it likely that Haley's supporters out there could eventually wind up voting for Biden?
Absolutely. And look, she has appealed to more moderate Republicans and certainly the independent voters. Look, I happened to pull my Haley flyer that I got in my door the other day. She specifically put a note on here, open primary. She was appealing to the independent voters and Democrats who might vote for Joe Biden. She appealed to them. So the fact that those are the voters that may have come out for her, they could potentially go to Biden. But I tell you what, fact check what Joe Biden just said, that Donald Trump is not appealing to try and win over Haley voters. He specifically said in his statement this morning, I welcome Haley voters to come to my campaign because right now our enemy is Joe Biden. So he can say that Biden's not welcoming them. That is simply not true.
He did that right after he trashed Nikki Haley.
Well, exactly.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Right after he trounced her, he welcomed her voters onto the Trump train.
But he also did it after several times when he said anyone who supports Nikki Haley is not welcome in the MAGA movement. So again, he's lying, right? Surprise. But that's going to be, I think, part of the case for the Democrats and for Joe Biden moving forward.
But we should just make clear, guys, this is bigger than just Haley voters. Joe Biden, Donald Trump has a very enthusiastic base of support. Joe Biden is showing some diminution of support in his core constituencies, whether it is voters of color, especially young male voters of color, whether it is progressives over the Israel-Gaza issue. He has work to do with some core components of his base apart from the need to get some of these Nikki Haley voters. The Nikki Haley voters piece is a slice of this. But this is also going to be, with these two disliked candidates, a real contest of revving up each side's base.
And I think one of the most important crosstabs we're seeing out of polling lately was the New York Times CNN poll over the weekend, where they asked voters whose policies help you personally and whose policies hurt you personally. And the majority of those polled say that Donald Trump's policies help them personally more than Joe Biden's. And that fact right there and that appeal to voters on what affects them personally is going to be a big factor in helping Donald Trump to win more voters into his camp.
But just very quickly on the enthusiasm for Joe Biden, clearly the Democratic coalition has not come home yet. They will. But if you look at what happened last night in the primaries, Joe Biden was taking his supporters 80%, 90%. It was Donald Trump, the one that was losing and has been losing 20%, 30%, 40%.
Those are big numbers.
So exactly. Yeah. So that core for President Biden is there. He understands he's got to grow this. The Democratic coalition is in a position right now where they might tell a pollster out of frustration, yeah, I don't like Joe Biden. I am dissatisfied with what he has done, because they know that that answer right then and there is not consequential when it comes down to voting. And that's why you see special elections where Democrats have been overperforming. That's why you see President Biden completely trouncing in fundraising, record amount of money for a president going into a re-election campaign, $132 million cash on hand. That's going to be a really strong position.
On the Democratic side, he really doesn't have any opposition right now. He's basically all by himself.
American Samoa was the only place.
I'll just say, Maria, you just laid out the bet that the Biden campaign is making. You said they will come home. That's his challenge over the next 8 months. We don't know that will happen yet, but that's the bet that they're placing.
That's right.
Maria, Alice, guys, thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Very, very much. Don't go too far away.